Greetings everyone, hello and welcome to Chilliteracy. Happy Wednesday! How are we all doing? Good lord, Lady Mephistopheles, you're on a 20 stream streak. Madness. Yes, hello everybody. How are we all doing? I hope we are well. Also, happy Pride. I realised this as I was putting this stream live that I haven't updated our Pride logo or anything, so I shall get on that. Your watch streak is apparently reset to 1. What stream did you miss? I don't know. My stream? I have no idea. Yes. How is everybody? Everybody all right? Doing pretty well, Parola? Good, good, good. I am glad. Yes, that's a good reading aloud joke, that, Arian. I like that. I'd like to have an audio, but it's just several hours of breathing and page turning with just someone at the end going, "Oh, you meant out loud." Yeah, that's good. I like that. But yes, hello, Parola. Hello, Arian. Hello, Sam, obviously. That's your name now. Hello, Smallcog. Lady Mephistopheles. I think that's everyone so far. Andy Pants as well. I think I said that already. There's no way you can't watch your own stream. Yeah, actually, that's a point. Does it count? I don't know if it does. Interesting. Oh, and the yawns begin. But yes, it is. The weather has now cooled down, so it is not as hot as it was last week, and hence why I missed last week's. Oh yeah, last week's stream maybe. No, because I didn't stream. We'll get there. Also, thank you very much, Arian, for the bits. Thank you very much indeed. Very, very well. Very appreciated. Very much appreciated. There's words. Words are difficult. But yes, it was like 30, 31 degrees in my room last Wednesday, and I was just like, yeah, no, this is too hot. And frankly, if I tried to stream, my PC is it's fine ish, but I feel like if I tried to stream on a particularly hot day, it might there is a less than zero possibility of my PC just like packing up and going no, not working midstream if it were too hot. So I decided that I wouldn't do that. So yeah, and also the day before I directed a choir rehearsal in similar temperatures, and it was just like, yeah, no, this is too much. But you know, the weather was nice. It was very warm, but it was very pleasant. After a while. It has been windy and less warm here in the last few days. It's been nice. Yes, the temperature today, I mean, it sort of dropped yesterday, but today it just has properly plummeted, and it's actually like cold again, and windy and rainy, which feels kind of nice, honestly. It's like, oh yeah, we're back in the UK. Good. Yeah, I kind of appreciate it, to be honest. The weather's actually pretty much perfect here today. Well, good. I'm glad. Hurrah for perfect weather. So tonight I have, I think, 3. We'll see how we get through them. 3, possibly more, stories for you, and I cannot find the first one anywhere. The text for it. It is, I think, out of copyright. It should be out of copyright. The author died in 1923. So, yeah, but I just cannot find... Gutenberg doesn't have it. Internet Archive, I don't think, has it. Cannot find it anywhere, which is a bit of a pain. So I'll actually, given that Andy's in chat... There we go. Ooh, a challenge. Yeah, hang on. Let me find where it is. It's in my massive book of short stories, where the bookmarks keep slipping down. It's by... Hang on. It's by... Oh, I can't spell. This chap, who I've just realised Arian might have heard of. Apparently Dutch. And it's called Bluebeard's Daughter. And and I think it's in his collection of, it's called 18 Tales. But yeah, I've looked for both of those and cannot find it anywhere. But you might have, not entirely sure, fair enough. But yes, we've got, and then I've got some Katherine Mansfield short stories for you after the break, because, you know, it is Pride Month. We got to read some of our favourite, definitely not a lesbian, Katherine Mansfield. She absolutely was. We all know. I mean, I feel like that's not even a reading into her work. I'm pretty sure the Wikipedia article on her says that she was. I think. Pretty sure. Anyway, definitely queer. And we do like Katherine Mansfield. She's great. So we've got some of those. But yeah, this first story I just kind of like, because I assume most of us know the myth, the legend of not myth, legend, folktale of Bluebeard. I assume Bluebeard's castle, Bluebeard. Shout if you don't. Yes, Smallcog does. Excellent. Yeah, the name is familiar. Oh, as in, know the name, but you think that's it, right? Bluebeard's very quick story of Bluebeard. Bluebeard, I don't entirely know what nationality the story is from. I want to say it's like Eastern European, like Czech or something. No idea. I feel like Lady Mephistopheles might be able to tell me. Basically, Bluebeard lives in a castle. He's got a blue beard, funnily enough, and he basically has, I think, 7 wives, and each one he kills. Does he kill them or does he lock them up? No, I think he kills them. And French. Oh, right. And each one he sort of entices in. You meant if Couperus not heard of Bluebeard? Yes, I assumed. And each of the wives, gets curious because he's quite, saying you can't go in this room. And of course they do, and they're like, oh, so you've killed many women. And then he goes, oh, well, you found out my secret. You're going to have to die too, soz. And this is how Bluebeard, that's his whole thing. Yay. And I can't remember how he gets killed. I'm pretty sure he does. I think his last wife manages to off him. I'm not entirely sure. I can't quite remember. It's been many, many years since I've heard the story. There is an opera of it though, which is pretty good. Can't remember who the composer is, but it's good opera. Bluebeard is French. Okay, in that case I was entirely wrong. Yes, not Blackbeard, not a pirate. But that is the context for this story, at least. And Bluetooth through Scandinavian, yes, quite. But yes, I think I'm not going to wait until Andy finds it, because she might not, frankly. Or it may take many hours, but that's fine. Andy, there is absolutely no pressure. I know you said you wanted a challenge, but there is no pressure. So we may be sans text for this one, but that's fine. You can all listen. That's sort of what this whole thing's about anyway. Ooh. Sorry, this book is very large. It's quite hard to fit on my desk. But this one's a bit of a short... they're all fairly short, these stories tonight, so it may be a shorter stream. We'll see. I just don't want to read, 7. But if we're all sitting comfortably, then I shall begin with the first story of tonight, which is Bluebeard's Daughter by Louis Couperus. Her name was Fatma, and she lived at one of her country seats near Baghdad. She was the daughter of Bluebeard by his first marriage, and she was a woman of marvellous beauty. About her moon-white face undulated her blue hair, falling down like a cloak over her frail shoulders. It is not generally known that Bluebeard had a daughter, Most people believe that he was killed childless by the brothers of his last wife, who inherited all his wealth. If they had, as I have, gone through the secret archives of the story, they would have found without much difficulty that Bluebeard died, his skull cleft in two, in the arms of his daughter, and left her all his possessions. The young orphan, the charming Fatma, had loved her father very much, just as he had been very fond of her, although she had never been able to approve of the manner in which he rid himself of his many disobedient wives. She thought this method was not gentle, not noble, and psychologically monotonous. She understood perfectly that each new stepmother could not but yield to the temptation of her curiosity. She did not condone her father's course, and looked upon it as an inexcusable act of sadism. The azure-locked Fatma remained a lonely young orphan, amidst her countless wealth and all her servants and slaves who surrounded her like a royal court. The distinguished families at Baghdad, at the court of the Caliph, spoke often about the rich, young, blue-haired girl, but in spite of her unbounded treasures, no one wished her to become the bride of a son or nephew. Her locks were too reminiscent of horrors. So the beautiful Fatma remained alone on her onyx terraces, which descended amidst groves of date trees and gardens of roses to crystal lakes, and she wandered back alone between the onyx columns of the arcades to her summer palace, which, paved with gold and silver flagstones, was also roofed with gold and silver tiles. Until she could no longer bear her loneliness, and was kindled with maidenly love for the overseer of her gardeners. He was a very handsome boy who came from the country, and the rusticity of his occupation lent him, in Fatma's eyes, somewhat tired with over-refinement, an irresistible charm. So that she married him, without worrying about what people would say of her at the court of the Caliph or in the distinguished circles of Baghdad. Fatma seemed very happy. She appeared with her husband in full state and elegant splendour in the town and in the country, in tapestried gondolas on the lakes, in cushioned litters in the streets, with a retinue of slaves in the bazaars, and even at the court festivities to which her rank and riches gave her admission. She and her beloved Emin made a magically beautiful couple. He, strong and young, glorying in his new riches. The upstart type did not yet exist in those days. She, radiating with love and inestimable jewels, which sparkled on her gauze turban and the hem of her cloak, while wonderfully large pearls glowed in her azure locks. And the distinguished Baghdad families began to feel sorry that they had not taken pains to win Bluebeard's daughter for a son or a nephew. Suddenly, however, the report spread that Emin had died. Only the day before all the inhabitants of Baghdad had seen him in the mosque, and look, now they heard that he had died. A shiver went through the town, but the Grand Vizier and the Lord Chief Justice saw no reason for taking steps in the matter, as the very creditable rumour was given out that Emin had, on that hot day, eaten too much watermelon and had expired after a violent colic. But people at Baghdad stared when, after 3 months, they heard that the young azure-haired widow was again about to marry, this time the lieutenant of her own bodyguard. Amongst so many servants and attendants, Fatma seemed to have too large a choice to take notice of the sons and nephews of the distinguished families of Baghdad. The marriage took place with fantastic splendour, and Fatma's new husband gloried as Emin had done, now that he saw himself raised so suddenly from a humble position to that of husband to his transcendentally rich and beautiful mistress. But the young lieutenant, Fatma had made him general of her bodyguard, died suddenly, as it was given out of a fall from his horse. It was a vague report, and besides, no one had seen the young Lieutenant General of Fatma's bodyguard either on his horse or falling from it. Nay, no one had seen him on the day of his death. And a violent emotion spread through the Baghdad families and at the court of Caliph, because it was remembered but too well that Fatma was blue-haired, as her father had once been blue-bearded. The sorrowing widow Fatma, in her black mourning veils, starred with black diamonds, looked like a queen of the night, particularly as her blue hair shimmered through the mourning veils with such a suggestive nocturnal tint that she could, without any make-up, have appeared in Mozart's Magic Flute. However, she did not sing the heavy and difficult coloratura, but preferred to take a third husband, this time simply one of the bearers of her palanquin. That the young Ali was a magnificent fellow, who now, as third husband, looked in his damask samar like a young sultan, could not be doubted. But what was doubted by the distinguished Baghdad families at the court of the Caliph was whether after 3 months of married life he had died a natural death. What? Such a strong, fine, healthy fellow as Fatma's palanquin-bearing husband to die of malaria, so it was said, and be unobtrusively buried like that? Heads nodded to each other, eyes stared with horror, mouths twitched with secret suppositions, and the Grand Vizier consulted with the Lord Chief Justice whether they should not intervene in the Fatma case, the case in which one husband after another died and disappeared after 3 months of matrimony. They consulted so long, however, that Fatma married a 4th, a 5th, and 6th time. The 4th time it was a Persian merchant from Tehran, to whom a long life had been foretold from the lines of his hand. The 5th time one of her gondoliers. The 6th time a humble slave who worked in Fatma's emerald mine. Each time, after 3 months, the wretched husband died, and the sorrowing widow went through Baghdad like the queen of the night. Then the cup seemed full. Grand Vizier and Lord Chief Justice repaired to Fatma's pleasure house, but it appeared that she had removed to another residence. For she had several, the one with the onyx terraces, and the one with the mother-of-pearl ballroom, and that with the chrysolite towers, not to mention the one with the agate bathroom, that with the quicksilver fountain, and that with the secret libraries full of occult knowledge. So that the Grand Vizier and the Lord Chief Justice, after having trudged from one pleasure house to another with no better fortune, at last found Fatma at home in her pleasure house of science. She received them slightly annoyed. She was not like the Queen of the Night. The beautiful azure-haired widow of 6 husbands seemed rather like a peri from paradise in her transparent white veils, but in this case a slightly annoyed peri. "What do you wish?" she asked haughtily. "To know the cause of your 6th husband's death." "Do you start your inquiries," asked Fatma, "with my 6th husband?" "We shall ascend to your first," threatened the dignitaries. "Why not descend to my last?" said Fatma, "and I have only this to say to you, that I have not got much to say. My 6th husband died of tertian ague." The dignitaries were about to make an angry reply, but at this moment appeared suddenly the man of the emerald mines himself, the 6th husband of Fatma. He looked healthy, strong, and amiable, and carried a few folios under his arm. "What is this?" exclaimed the noble gentleman. Fatma shrugged her frail shoulders. "This means no more," she deigned to explain, "than that the dear boy is not dead. He is only rather stupid, and so, to improve his conversational powers, I took him to this secret library, that he might read a little at his ease." "But," the Grand Vizier suddenly had his eyes opened, What about your other 5 husbands, then, oh blue-haired Fatima?" "They live," she admitted, "like my minor husband. But I sequestered my gondolier husband in the pleasure house of the Quicksilver Fountains to teach him to be somewhat quicker in his occupation of gondolier husband, for he was often very slow at rowing the matrimonial boat over the lake of love, and quicksilver, administered in small doses, sends the blood flowing through the veins. My Persian merchant still drags out his life, which will be a long one, in my villa with the agate bathroom, for he sometimes smelt unpleasantly of his camels. My palanquin spouse I locked up in my chrysolite tower because the wretch flirted with my women, and I wanted to keep him to myself. Then there is my Lieutenant General. With him, gentlemen, I dance every night in my mother-of-pearl ballroom. He waltzes gloriously, and it is not proper that such an intimate joy should be indulged in the presence of all and everyone, so the darling quietly waits in the mother-of-pearl ballroom till I unlock it. And, to speak the truth, my first boy is dearest to me, you know, my gardener, and honestly he also is still alive, and dwells not far away from the onyx terraces, so that I can easily reach him whenever I long for him. Sorry. You look astonished, gentlemen. But there it is. You see, I am Bluebeard's daughter, and I take after him, in soul and in locks. He felt a desire for many wives, I feel a desire for many husbands. But he killed his wives on the pretext that they were disobedient to him. I never killed my husbands. I preferred to lock them up, to civilize them, and have power over them. If I am hysterical, I am also very much of a feminist, and in every respect I am a woman. What more do you want to know?" And the proud Fatma stood haughtily before the 2 dignitaries of the Caliph. But these unexpectedly called for their menials and commanded, "Seize this bad woman and bring her before the divan of the Most High." Thus it happened. Fatma, Bluebeard's daughter, was dragged through all the streets and all the squares of Baghdad to the Caliph's divan, who condemned her to lay her azure-locked head on the block. It is strange, thought Fatma when she was given up to the hands of the executioners. My father murdered his wives and was very much blamed for it. I myself objected to his course. I, his daughter, never murdered my husbands. I tended them lovingly, nurtured them, civilized them, developed their faculties. It is true in a somewhat secluded manner, in onyx gardens, chrysolite towers, mother-of-pearl ballrooms, and all the rest of it, and this conception of marriage, however well thought out, also meets with disapproval. It is strange, continued her thoughts, but I believe, I almost know it for certain, that it is not possible to satisfy public opinion in the matter of love and marriage when one has a blue beard or blue locks. And somewhat saddened by this irrefutable philosophy, she bent down her azure-haired head on the block, tried to solve the problem in the last second, but failed, for in a purple stream her last ideas flowed from her riven neck. And the azure-haired head of Bluebeard's daughter lay in blood on the floor of the Hall of Justice. After which the 6 husbands inherited all her wealth. The end. I kind of love that one. It is like, it's a lot more kind of tongue-in-cheek than I expected when I first read it. I was like, huh, okay, interesting. Yeah. Because I just locked them up. What are you complaining about? Exactly. I mean, I do kind of appreciate the fact that she's, you know, going for people who don't have a lot in life and giving them a lot in life, which is I guess good. Don't lock people up. I don't think that's necessarily the best way about it, but I mean, she's not killing them, and they're probably living in luxury, so it's all fine, right? But yeah, I do quite like that. I also just quite like I don't quite like, but I find it interesting the fact that, you know, she's, because I don't think Bluebeard gets like arrested or anything. It's just like, oh yeah, he can just have all the wives he wants, that's fine. Whereas she's just like, no. But I guess the authorities learnt from the fact that her father killed all his wives, and it's just like, yeah, this is getting a bit suspicious now. But I like, if I am hysterical, I am also very much of a feminist in every respect. I am a woman. It's just like, yes, I approve of this statement. Sure, it's fine when he does it. Exactly. She's not killing them. It's fine. So, yes, it's quite a fun little one. That story. I guess we might move on to good old Kay Mansfield now, actually. If I can find where I put things. Right, let me just excuse me. Where's Gutenberg? There we go. Nope, that is the wrong one. Problem with Katherine Mansfield, I should have done this beforehand. Problem with Katherine Mansfield, she wrote so many flippin' stories. Maybe this doesn't appear. Hang on a second, everybody. It is in that book. What? Sorry. Oh, no, I just didn't scroll down far enough because I am a fool. Right. Doopy-doopy-doo. Oh yes, the PDF seemed to work for those in America, but not in the UK, annoyingly. For the previous one. But yes, this may be a shorter stream. For some reason I thought, oh, you can download it and just send file. Ah, neat. Yes, I didn't expect that. I didn't expect to be able to read that as quickly as I did. So apologies if I read too fast there. Hopefully not. But yeah, got a few good old Katherine Mansfield stories here. So if we are all sitting comfortably, again, still, whatever, the text is at the top of chat. And we shall continue with the first of our Katherine Mansfield stories for tonight, which is A Cup of Tea by Katherine Mansfield. Rosemary Fell was not exactly beautiful. No, you couldn't have called her beautiful. Pretty? Well, if you took her to pieces. But why be so cruel as to take anyone to pieces? She was young, brilliant, extremely modern, exquisitely well-dressed, amazingly well-read in the newest of the new books, and her parties were the most delicious mixture of the really important people and artists. Quaint creatures, discoveries of hers, some of them too terrifying for words, but others quite presentable and amusing. Rosemary had been married 2 years. She had a duck of a boy. No, not Peter, Michael. And her husband absolutely adored her. They were rich, really rich, not just comfortably well off, which is odious and stuffy and sounds like one's grandparents. But if Rosemary wanted to shop, she would go to Paris, as you and I would go to Bond Street. If she wanted to buy flowers, the car pulled up at that perfect shop in Regent Street, and Rosemary inside the shop just gazed in her dazzled, rather exotic way and said, I want those and those and those. Give me 4 bunches of those and that jar of roses. Yes, I'll have all the roses in the jar. No, no lilac. I hate lilac. It's got no shape." The attendant bowed and put the lilac out of sight, as though this was only too true. Lilac was dreadfully shapeless. "Give me those stumpy little tulips, those red and white ones." And she was followed to the car by a thin shop girl staggering under an immense white paper armful that looked like a baby in long clothes. One winter afternoon she had been buying something in a little antique shop in Curzon Street. It was a shop she liked. For one thing, one usually had it to oneself. And then the man who kept it was ridiculously fond of serving her. He beamed whenever she came in. He clasped his hands. He was so gratified he could scarcely speak. Flattery, of course. All the same, there was something. "You see, madam," he would explain in his low, respectful tones, "I love my things. I would rather not part with them than sell them to someone who does not appreciate them, who has not that fine feeling which is so rare." And, breathing deeply, he unrolled a tiny square of blue velvet and pressed it on the glass counter with his pale fingertips. Today it was a little box. He had been keeping it for her. He had shown it to nobody as yet. An exquisite little enamel box, with a glaze so fine it looked as though it had been baked in cream. On the lid a minute creature stood under a flowery tree, and a more minute creature still had her arms round his neck. Her hat, really no bigger than a geranium petal, hung from a branch. It had green ribbons. And there was a pink cloud like a watchful cherub floating above their heads. Rosemary took her hands out of her long gloves. She always took off her gloves to examine such things. Yes, she liked it very much. She loved it. It was a great duck. She must have it. And, turning the creamy box, opening and shutting it, she couldn't help noticing how charming her hands were against the blue velvet. The shopman, in some dim cavern of his mind, may have dared to think so too. For he took a pencil, leant over the counter, and his pale, bloodless fingers crept timidly towards those rosy, flashing ones, as he murmured gently, "If I may venture to point out to madam the flowers on the little lady's bodice." Charming! Rosemary admired the flowers. But what was the price? For a moment the shopman did not seem to hear. Then a murmur reached her. 28 guineas, madam." 28 guineas. Rosemary gave no sign. She laid the little box down. She buttoned her gloves again. 28 guineas. Even if one is rich. She looked vague. She stared at a plump tea kettle like a plump hen above the shopman's head, and her voice was dreamy as she answered, "Well, keep it for me, will you? I'll—" But the shopman had already bowed, as though keeping it for her was all any human being could ask. He would be willing, of course, to keep it for her forever. The discreet door shut with a click. She was outside on the step, gazing at the winter afternoon. Rain was falling, and with the rain it seemed the dark came too, spinning down like ashes. There was a cold, bitter taste in the air, and the new lighted lamps looked sad. Sad were the lights in the houses opposite. Dimly they burned, as if regretting something. And people hurried by, hidden under their hateful umbrellas. Rosemary felt a strange pang. She pressed her muffler against her breast. She wished she had the little box too to cling to. Of course, the car was there. She had only to cross the pavement. But still she waited. There are moments, horrible moments in life, when one emerges from shelter and looks out, and it's awful. One oughtn't to give way to them. One ought to go home and have an extra special tea. But at the very instant of thinking that, a young girl, thin, dark, shadowy, where had she come from, was standing at Rosemary's elbow, and a voice like a sigh, almost a sob, breathed, "Madam, may I speak to you a moment?" "Speak to me?" Rosemary turned. She saw a little battered creature with enormous eyes, someone quite young, no older than herself, who clutched at her coat collar with reddened hands and shivered as though she had just come out of the water. "Madam," stammered the voice, "would you let me have the price of a cup of tea?" A cup of tea? There was something simple, sincere in that voice. It wasn't in the least the voice of a beggar. "Then have you no money at all?" asked Rosemary. "None, madam," came the answer. How extraordinary! Rosemary peered through the dusk, and the girl gazed back at her. How more than extraordinary! And suddenly it seemed to Rosemary such an adventure. It was like something out of a novel by Dostoevsky, this meeting in the dusk. Supposing she took the girl home? Supposing she did do one of those things that she was always reading about or seeing on the stage? What would happen? It would be thrilling. And she heard herself saying afterwards, to the amazement of her friends, "I simply took her home with me," as she stepped forward and said to that dim person beside her, "Come home to tea with me." The girl drew back, startled. She even stopped shivering for a moment. Rosemary put out a hand and touched her arm. "I mean it," she said, smiling, and she felt how simple and kind her smile was. "Why won't you? Do, come home with me now in my car and have tea." You don't mean it, madam," said the girl, and there was pain in her voice. "But I do," cried Rosemary. "I want you to please me. Come along." The girl put her fingers to her lips, and her eyes devoured Rosemary. You're not taking me to the police station?" she stammered. "The police station?" Rosemary laughed out. "Why should I be so cruel? No, I only want to make you warm and to hear anything you care to tell me." Hungry people are easily led. The footman held the door of the car open, and a moment later they were skimming through the dusk. "There," said Rosemary. She had a feeling of triumph as she slipped her hand through the velvet strap. She could have said, "Now I've got you," as she gazed at the little captive she had netted. But of course she meant it kindly. Oh, more than kindly. She was going to prove to this girl that wonderful things did happen in life, that fairy godmothers were real, that rich people had hearts, and that women were sisters. She turned impulsively, saying, "Don't be frightened. After all, why shouldn't you come back with me? We're both women. If I'm the more fortunate, you ought to expect." But happily at that moment, for she did not know how the sentence was going to end, the car stopped. The bell was rung, the door opened, and with a charming, protecting, almost embracing movement, Rosemary drew the other into the hall. Warmth, softness, light, a sweet scent, all those things so familiar to her she never even thought about them. She watched that other receive. It was fascinating. She was like the rich little girl in her nursery with all the cupboards to open, all the boxes to unpack. Come upstairs," said Rosemary, longing to begin to be generous. "Come up to my room." And besides, she wanted to spare this poor little thing from being stared at by the servants. She decided as they mounted the stairs she would not even ring for Jeanne, but take off her things by herself. The great thing was to be natural. And there, cried Rosemary again, as they reached her beautiful big bedroom with the curtains drawn, the fire leaping on her wonderful lacquer furniture, her gold cushions and the primrose and blue rugs. The girl stood just inside the door. She seemed dazed, but Rosemary didn't mind that. "Come and sit down," she cried, dragging her big chair up to the fire, "in this comfy chair. Come and get warm. You look so dreadfully cold." "I daren't, madam," said the girl, and she edged backwards. "Oh, please." Rosemary ran forward. "You mustn't be frightened, you mustn't, really. Sit down, and when I've taken off my things, we shall go into the next room and have tea and be cosy. Why are you afraid?" And gently she half pushed the thin figure into its deep cradle. But there was no answer. The girl stayed just as she had been put, with her hands by her sides and her mouth slightly open. To be quite sincere, she looked rather stupid. But Rosemary wouldn't acknowledge it. She leant over her, saying, "Won't you take off your hat? Your pretty hair is all wet, and one is so much more comfortable without a hat, isn't one?" There was a whisper that sounded like, "Very good, madam," and the crushed hat was taken off. "And let me help you off with your coat, too," said Rosemary. The girl stood up, but she held on to the chair with one hand and let Rosemary pull. It was quite an effort. The other scarcely helped her at all. She seemed to stagger like a child, and the thought came and went through Rosemary's mind that if people wanted helping, they must respond a little, just a little, otherwise it became very difficult indeed. And what was she to do with the coat now? She left it on the floor, and the hat too. She was just going to take a cigarette off the mantelpiece when the girl said quickly, but so lightly and strangely, "I'm very sorry, madam, but I'm going to faint. I shall go off, madam, if I don't have something." "Good heavens, how thoughtless I am!" Rosemary rushed to the bell. "Tea at once, and some brandy immediately." The maid was gone again, but the girl almost cried out, "No, I don't want no brandy. I never drink brandy. It's a cup of tea I want, madam." And she burst into tears. It was a terrible and fascinating moment. Rosemary knelt beside her chair. "Don't cry, poor little thing," she said. "Don't cry." And she gave the other her lace handkerchief. She really was touched beyond words. She put her arm round those thin, bird-like shoulders. Now at last the other forgot to be shy, forgot everything except that they were both women, and gasped out, "I can't go on no longer like this. I can't bear it. I can't bear it. I shall do away with myself. I can't bear no more." "You shan't have to. I'll look after you. Don't cry any more. Don't you see what a good thing it was that you met me? We'll have tea and you'll tell me everything. And I shall arrange something, I promise. Do stop crying. It's so exhausting. Please." The other did stop just in time for Rosemary to get up before the tea came. She had the table placed between them. She plied the poor creature with everything, all the sandwiches, all the bread and butter, and every time her cup was empty she filled it with tea, cream and sugar. People always said sugar was so nourishing. As for herself, she didn't eat. She smoked and looked away tactfully so that the other should not be shy. And really the effect of that slight meal was marvellous. When the tea table was carried away, a new being, a light, frail creature with tangled hair, dark lips, deep, lighted eyes, lay back in the big chair in a kind of sweet languor, looking at the blaze. Rosemary lit a fresh cigarette. It was time to begin. "And when did you have your last meal?" she asked softly. But at that moment the door handle turned. "Rosemary, may I come in?" It was Philip. "Of course." He came in. "Oh, I'm so sorry," he said, and stopped and stared. "It's quite all right," said Rosemary, smiling. "This is my friend, Miss Smith, madam," said the languid figure, who was strangely still and unafraid. "Smith," said Rosemary, "we are going to have a little talk." "Oh, yes," said Philip. "Quite." And his eye caught sight of the coat and hat on the floor. He came over to the fire and turned his back to it. "It's a beastly afternoon," he said curiously, still looking at that listless figure, looking at its hands and boots, and then at Rosemary again. "Yes, isn't it?" said Rosemary enthusiastically. "Vile." Philip smiled his charming smile. "As a matter of fact," said he, "I wanted you to come into the library for a moment. Would you? Will Miss Smith excuse us?" The big eyes were raised to him, but Rosemary answered for her, "Of course she will." And they went out of the room together. "I say," said Philip, when they were alone. "Explain. Who is she? What does it all mean?" Rosemary, laughing, leaned against the door and said, "I picked her up in Curzon Street. Really, she's a real pick-up. She asked me for the price of a cup of tea and I brought her home with me." "But what on earth are you going to do with her?" cried Philip. "Be nice to her," said Rosemary quickly. "Be frightfully nice to her. Look after her. I don't know how. We haven't talked yet. But show her, treat her, make her feel—" "My darling girl," said Philip, "you're quite mad, you know. It simply can't be done." "I knew you'd say that," retorted Rosemary. "Why not? I want to. Isn't that a reason? And besides, one's always reading about these things. I decided—" "But," said Philip slowly, and he cut the end of a cigar, "she's so astonishingly pretty." "Pretty?" Rosemary was so surprised that she blushed. "Do you think so? I hadn't thought about it." "Good Lord!" Philip struck a match. "She's absolutely lovely. Look again, my child. I was bowled over when I came into your room just now. However, I think you're making a ghastly mistake. Sorry, darling, if I'm crude and all that, but let me know if Miss Smith is going to dine with us in time for me to look up the Milliner's Gazette." "You absurd creature," said Rosemary, and she went out of the library, but not back to her bedroom. She went to her writing room and sat down at her desk. Pretty? Absolutely lovely? Bowled over? Her heart beat like a heavy bell. Pretty? Lovely? She drew her cheque-book towards her. But no, cheques would be no use, of course. She opened a drawer and took out £5 notes, looked at them, put 2 back, and holding the 3 squeezed in her hand, she went back to her bedroom. Half an hour later, Philip was still in the library when Rosemary came in. "I only wanted to tell you," said she, and she leaned against the door again and looked at him with her dazzled, exotic gaze. "Miss Smith won't dine with us tonight." Philip put down the paper. "Oh, what's happened? Previous engagement?" Rosemary came over and sat down on his knee. "She insisted on going," said she, "so I gave the poor little thing a present of money. I couldn't keep her against her will, could I?" she added softly. Rosemary had just done her hair, darkened her eyes a little, and put on her pearls. She put up her hands and touched Philip's cheeks. "Do you like me?" said she, and her tone, sweet, husky, troubled him. "I like you awfully," he said, and he held her tighter. "Kiss me." There was a pause. Then, Rosemary said dreamily, "I saw a fascinating little box today. It cost 28 guineas. May I have it?" Philip jumped her on his knee. "You may, little wasteful one," said he. But that was not really what Rosemary wanted to say. "Philip," she whispered, and she pressed his head against her bosom. "Am I pretty?" The end. I like... God, Katherine Mansfield. She's so good. Also, hello, Hubris. Hope you're well. Also, hello, Billiam. Hope you're well, too. Welcome in both. Yeah. Rich people. Almost filth. Exactly. But yeah, it's just really sad. It's just like, oh, I can just pick up and discard a whole human being whenever I feel like it. It's like, this is a person. You just because your husband thinks, what the... Come on. So yeah. What a fun adventure for her, exactly, as I am sure she'll tell all her friends how interesting it was. Oh, it was such a very interesting moment. Whereas this poor girl is back on the streets. And also she took out £5 notes and put 2 back. It's like, oh. I mean, yeah. It's accurate. As Katherine Mansfield, she's perfect. In her just like she's I know I go on about how much I love Katherine Mansfield, but like she is so astute. Like every little thing you're like, oh yeah, you just get people. She needs the money to get the box. She can't give it all to the poor. Exactly. The accuracy, it's astounding. I know. It is. Yeah. She's so good. Making you feel all the feels. And making points about people. But yes, I hope you enjoyed those two. Might do another couple after the possibly the other two. I only really had another one. I might be able to do 2 more. They won't be very long though. But yes, I shall throw us all to a break, so go do break related things, and we will see you back in about 5 minutes. Bye for now. And we return. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you all had a good break. I just sat here. Yeah, don't really do much. Yeah, we're just going to do another couple of stories. They're very short, so I'll probably finish stream earlier than 11. Well, my time 11 anyway. Might see about raiding over afterwards to someone who's live. I don't know. Another couple of Katherine Mansfield stories for you. I haven't changed the link at the top of chat. You should just be able to scroll down on that link because it's just the next two stories in this particular collection. Excuse me, my voice is starting to get a bit bleh. So hopefully it'll hold out for these next two. We have a slightly kind of more, I guess, upbeat, upbeat one, and then a very much not upbeat one. So that is your warning. We're gonna end on a down note. So apologies for that. But it's still beautiful. It's still beautiful writing, and stories that good to tell. They're just stories of ordinary people, which is great. But yes, if we are all sitting comfortably again, I shall continue tonight's stream with the next story, which is Taking the Veil by Katherine Mansfield. It seemed impossible that anyone should be unhappy on such a beautiful morning. Nobody was, decided Edna, except herself. The windows were flung wide in the houses. From within there came the sound of pianos. Little hands chased after each other and ran away from each other, practicing scales. The trees fluttered in the sunny gardens, all bright with spring flowers. Street boys whistled. A little dog barked. People passed by, walking so lightly, so swiftly, they looked as though they wanted to break into a run. Now she actually saw in the distance a parasol, peach-coloured, the first parasol of the year. Perhaps even Edna did not look quite as unhappy as she felt. It is not easy to look tragic at 18 when you are extremely pretty, with the cheeks and lips and shining eyes of perfect health. Above all, when you are wearing a French blue frock and your new spring hat trimmed with cornflowers. True, she carried under her arm a book bound in horrid black leather. Perhaps the book provided a gloomy note, but only by accident. It was the ordinary library binding. For Edna had made going to the library an excuse for getting out of the house, to think, to realise what had happened, to decide somehow what was to be done now. An awful thing had happened. Quite suddenly, at the theatre last night, when she and Jimmy were seated side by side in the dress circle, without a moment's warning, in fact, she had just finished a chocolate almond and passed the box to him again, she had fallen in love with an actor. But fallen in love. The feeling was unlike anything she had ever imagined before. It wasn't in the least pleasant. It was hardly thrilling, unless you can call the most dreadful sensation of hopeless misery, despair, agony, and wretchedness thrilling. combined with the certainty that if the actor met her on the pavement after, while Jimmy was fetching their cab, she would follow him to the ends of the earth, at a nod, at a sign, without giving another thought to Jimmy or her father and mother, or her happy home and countless friends again. The play had begun fairly cheerfully. That was at the chocolate almond stage. Then the hero had gone blind. Terrible moment. Edna had cried so much she had to borrow Jimmy's folded, smooth-feeling handkerchief as well. Not that crying mattered. Whole rows were in tears. Even the men blew their noses with a loud trumpeting noise and tried to peer at the programme instead of looking at the stage. Jimmy, most mercifully dry-eyed, for what would she have done without his handkerchief, squeezed her free hand and whispered, "Cheer up, darling girl." And it was then she had taken a last chocolate almond to please him and passed the box again. Then there had been that ghastly scene with the hero alone on the stage in a deserted room at twilight, with a band playing outside and the sound of cheering coming from the street. He had tried, how painfully, how pitifully, to grope his way to the window. He had succeeded at last. There he stood, holding the curtain, while one beam of light, just one beam, shone full on his raised, sightless face, and the band faded away into the distance. It was absolutely, it was simply, in fact, from that moment Edna knew that life could never be the same. She drew her hand away from Jimmy's, leaned back, and shut the chocolate box forever. This, at last, was love. Edna and Jimmy were engaged. She had had her hair up for a year and a half. They had been publicly engaged for a year. But they had known they were going to marry each other ever since they walked in the botanical gardens with their nurses and sat on the grass with a wine biscuit and a piece of barley sugar each for their tea. It was so much an accepted thing that Edna had worn a wonderfully good imitation of an engagement ring out of a cracker all the time she was at school, and up till now they had been devoted to each other. But now it was over. It was so completely over that Edna found it difficult to believe that Jimmy did not realise it too. She smiled wisely, sadly, as she turned into the gardens of the Convent of the Sacred Heart and mounted the path that led through them to Hill Street. How much better to know it now than to wait till after they were married. Now it was possible that Jimmy would get over it. No, it was no use deceiving herself. He would never get over it. His life was wrecked, was ruined. That was inevitable. But he was young. Time, people always said, time might make a little, just a little difference. In 40 years, when he was an old man, he might be able to think of her calmly. Perhaps. But she, what did the future hold for her? Edna had reached the top of the path. There, under a new-leafed tree, hung with little bunches of white flowers, she sat down on a green bench and looked over the convent flower-beds. In the one nearest to her there grew tender stocks, with a border of blue, shell-like pansies, with at one corner a clump of creamy freesias, their light spears of green criss-crossed over the flowers. The convent pigeons were tumbling high in the air, and she could hear the voice of Sister Agnes, who was giving a singing lesson. "Ah me," sounded the deep tones of the nun, and "ah me," they were echoed. If she did not marry Jimmy, of course she would marry nobody. The man she was in love with, the famous actor, Edna had far too much common sense not to realise that would never be. It was very odd. She didn't even want it to be. Her love was too intense for that. It had to be endured, silently. It had to torment her. It was, she supposed, simply that kind of love. "But, Edna," cried Jimmy, "can you never change? Can I never hope again?" Oh, what sorrow to have to say it, but it must be said. No, Jimmy, I will never change. Edna bowed her head, and a little flower fell on her lap, and the voice of Sister Agnes cried suddenly, "Ah, no," and the echo came, "Ah, no." At that moment the future was revealed. Edna saw it all. She was astonished. It took her breath away at first. But after all, what could be more natural? She would go into a convent. Her father and mother do everything to dissuade her, in vain. As for Jimmy, his state of mind hardly bears thinking about. Why can't they understand? How can they add to her suffering like this? The world is cruel, terribly cruel. After a last scene, when she gives away her jewellery and so on to her best friends, she so calm, they so broken-hearted, into a convent she goes. No, one moment. The very evening of her going is the actor's last evening at Port Willin. He receives, by a strange messenger, a box. It is full of white flowers, but there is no name, no card. Nothing? Yes, under the roses, wrapped in a white handkerchief, Edna's last photograph with, written underneath, "The world forgetting, by the world forgot." Edna sat very still under the trees. She clasped the black book in her fingers as though it were her missal. She takes the name of Sister Angela. Snip, snip, all her lovely hair is cut off. Will she be allowed to send one curl to Jimmy? It is contrived somehow. And in a blue gown with a white headband, Sister Angela goes from the convent to the chapel, from the chapel to the convent, with something unearthly in her look, in her sorrowful eyes, and in the gentle smile with which they greet the little children who run to her. A saint! She hears it whispered as she paces the chill wax-smelling corridors. A saint! And visitors to the chapel are told of the nun whose voice is heard above the other voices, of her youth, her beauty, of her tragic, tragic love. There is a man in this town whose life is ruined. A big bee, a golden furry fellow, crept into a freesia, and the delicate flower leaned over, swung, shook, and when the bee flew away it fluttered, still as though it were laughing. Happy, careless flower. Sister Angela looked at it and said, "Now it is winter." One night, lying in her icy cell, she hears a cry. Some stray animal is out there in the garden, a kitten or a lamb or, well, whatever little animal might be there. Up rises the sleepless nun. All in white, shivering but fearless, she goes and brings it in. But next morning, when the bell rings for matins, she is found tossing in high fever, in delirium, and she never recovers. In 3 days all is over. The service has been said in the chapel, and she is buried in the corner of the cemetery reserved for the nuns, where there are plain little crosses of wood. Rest in peace, Sister Angela. Now it is evening. 2 old people leaning on each other come slowly to the grave and kneel down sobbing, "Our daughter, our only daughter." Now there comes another. He is all in black. He comes slowly. But when he is there and lifts his black hat, Edna sees to her horror his hair is snow white. Jimmy! Too late, too late. The tears are running down his face. He is crying now. Too late, too late. The wind shakes the leafless trees in the churchyard. He gives one awful, bitter cry. Edna's black book fell with a thud to the garden path. She jumped up, her heart beating. "My darling! No, it's not too late. It's all been a mistake, a terrible dream. Oh, that white hair! How could she have done it? She has not done it. Oh, heavens! Oh, what happiness! She is free, young, and nobody knows her secret. Everything is still possible for her and Jimmy. The house they have planned may still be built. The little solemn boy, with his hands behind his back, watching them plant the standard roses, may still be born. His baby sister. But when Edna got as far as his baby sister, she stretched out her arms as though the little love came flying through the air to her, and gazing at the garden, at the white sprays on the tree, at those darling pigeons blue against the blue, and the convent with its narrow windows, she realised that now, at last, for the first time in her life, she had never imagined any feeling like it before, she knew what it was to be in love. But in love. The end. That is possibly the best depiction of a sudden teenage crush I think I've ever read. Ah, teenagers, indeed. It's like, oh, it's awful. I've fallen in love with an actor. I can relate. I feel like everybody can relate. And then just like goes through the entirety of her life in her head. And then it's like, oh no, actually, it's all fine. And then it's like, oh, maybe I do actually like the guy I'm engaged to. Oh, it's all fine then. I'm in love with him instead. It's like, oh, for God's sake. But also, don't get engaged as teenagers. Bad idea. Also, hello Mary Moss, hope you're well, welcome in. But yes, I really do enjoy how Katherine Mansfield writes people thinking incredibly dramatically. It's very fun to read. You're well, Mary Moss? Excellent, I'm glad to hear it. I'm doing all right, thank you. I'm enjoying these stories. Right. Let us... Sorry, excuse all the rustling page noises. We're going to finish with a sadder one, unfortunately. It's if you scroll down on the thing, it's called The Fly. Yeah. But it's you know, beautifully written, as usual. So, if you're all sitting comfortably, I shall read us our last story for tonight, which is The Fly by Katherine Mansfield. "Y'are very snug in here," piped old Mr. Wooderfield, and he peered out of the great green leather armchair by his friend the boss's desk as a baby peers out of its pram. His talk was over. It was time for him to be off. But he did not want to go. Since he had retired, since his stroke, the wife and the girls kept him boxed up in the house every day of the week except Tuesday. On Tuesday he was dressed and brushed and allowed to cut back to the city for the day. Though what he did there the wife and the girls couldn't imagine. Made a nuisance of himself to his friends, they supposed. Well, perhaps so. All the same, we cling to our last pleasures as the tree clings to its last leaves. So there sat old Wooderfield, smoking a cigar and staring almost greedily at the boss, who rolled in his office chair, stout, rosy, 5 years older than he, and still going strong, still at the helm. It did one good to see him. Wistfully, admiringly, the old voice added, "It's snug in here, upon my word." "Yes, it's comfortable enough," agreed the boss, and he flipped the Financial Times with a paper knife. As a matter of fact, he was proud of his room. He liked to have it admired, especially by old Wooderfield. It gave him a feeling of deep, solid satisfaction to be planted there in the midst of it all, in full view of that frail old figure in the muffler. "I've had it done up lately," he explained, as he had explained for the past how many weeks. "New carpet," and he pointed to the bright red carpet with a pattern of large white rings. "New furniture," and he nodded towards the massive bookcase and the table with legs like twisted treacle. "Electric heating!" He waved almost exultantly towards the 5 transparent, pearly sausages glowing so softly in the tilted copper pan. But he did not draw old Woodfield's attention to the photograph over the table of a grave-looking boy in uniform standing in one of those spectral photographers' parks with photographers' storm clouds behind him. It was not new. It had been there for over 6 years. "There was something I wanted to tell you," said old Woodfield, and his eyes grew dim remembering. "Now, what was it? I had it in my mind when I started out this morning." His hands began to tremble, and patches of red showed above his beard. "Poor old chap, he's on his last pins," thought the boss. And, feeling kindly, he winked at the old man, and said jokingly, "I'll tell you what, I've got a little drop of something here that'll do you good before you go out into the cold again. It's beautiful stuff. It wouldn't hurt a child." He took a key off his watch chain, unlocked a cupboard below his desk, and drew forth a dark, squat bottle. "That's the medicine," said he, "and the man from whom I got it told me on the strict QT it came from the cellars at Windsor Castle." Old Woodfield's mouth fell open at the sight. He couldn't have looked more surprised if the boss had produced a rabbit. "It's whiskey, ain't it?" he piped feebly. The boss turned the bottle and lovingly showed him the label. Whiskey it was. "Do you know," said he, peering up at the boss wonderingly, "they won't let me touch it at home." And he looked as though he was going to cry. "Ah, that's where we know a bit more than the ladies," cried the boss, swooping across for 2 tumblers that stood on the table with the water bottle and pouring a generous finger into each. "Drink it down, it'll do you good. And don't put any water with it. It's sacrilege to tamper with stuff like this." He tossed off his, pulled out his handkerchief, hastily wiped his moustaches, and cocked an eye at old Woodfield, who was rolling his in his chaps. The old man swallowed, was silent a moment, and then said faintly, "It's nutty." But it warmed him. It crept into his chill old brain. He remembered. "That was it," he said, heaving himself out of his chair. "I thought you'd like to know. The girls were in Belgium last week having a look at poor Reggie's grave, and they happened to come across your boys. They're quite near each other, it seems." Old Woodfield paused, but the boss made no reply. Only a quiver in his eyelids showed that he heard. "The girls were delighted with the way the place is kept," piped the old voice. "Beautifully looked after. Couldn't be better if they were at home. You've not been across, have you?" No. For various reasons, the boss had not been across. "There's miles of it," quavered old Woodfield, "and it's all as neat as a garden. Flowers growing on all the graves, nice broad paths." It was plain from his voice how much he liked a nice broad path. The pause came again. Then the old man brightened wonderfully. "Do you know what the hotel made the girls pay for a pot of jam?" he piped. 10 francs! Robbery, I call it. It was a little pot, so Gertrude says, no bigger than a half-crown. And she hadn't taken more than a spoonful when they charged her 10 francs. Gertrude brought the pot away with her to teach 'em a lesson. Quite right, too. It's trading on our feelings. They think because we're over there having a look round we're ready to pay anything. That's what it is." And he turned towards the door. Quite right, cried the boss, though what was quite right he hadn't the least idea. He came round by his desk, followed the shuffling footsteps to the door, and saw the old fellow out. Woodfield was gone. For a long moment the boss stayed, staring at nothing, while the grey-haired office messenger, watching him, dodged in and out of his cubbyhole like a dog that expects to be taken for a run. Then, "I'll see nobody for half an hour, Macy," said the boss. "Understand? Nobody at all." "Very good, sir." The door shut. The firm, heavy steps recrossed the bright carpet. The fat body plumped down in the spring chair, and, leaning forward, the boss covered his face with his hands. He intended, he had arranged to weep. It had been a terrible shock to him when old Woodfield sprang that remark upon him about the boy's grave. It was exactly as though the earth had opened and he had seen the boy lying there with Woodfield's girls staring down at him. For it was strange. Although over 6 years had passed away, the boss never thought of the boy except as lying unchanged, unblemished in his uniform, asleep forever. "My son," groaned the boss. But no tears came yet. In the past, in the first months and even years after the boy's death, he had only to say those words to be overcome by such grief that nothing short of a violent fit of weeping could relieve him. Time, he had declared then, he had told everybody, could make no difference. Other men might perhaps recover, might live their loss down, but not he. How was it possible? His boy was an only son. Ever since his birth, the boss had worked at building up this business for him. It had no other meaning if it was not for the boy. Life itself had come to have no other meaning. How on earth could he have slaved, denied himself, kept going all those years without the promise, forever before him, of the boy's stepping into his shoes and carrying on where he left off? And that promise had been so near being fulfilled. The boy had been in the office learning the ropes for a year before the war. Every morning they had started off together, they had come back by the same train. And what congratulations he had received as the boy's father. No wonder, he had taken to it marvellously. As to his popularity with the staff, every man jack of 'em, down to old Macy, couldn't make enough of the boy. And he wasn't in the least spoilt. No, he was just his bright, natural self, with the right word for everybody, with that boyish look and his habit of saying, "Simply splendid." But all that was over and done with, as though it had never been. The day had come when Macy had handed him the telegram that brought the whole place crashing about his head. "Deeply regret to inform you." And he had left the office a broken man, with his life in ruins. 6 years ago. 6 years. How quickly time passed. It might have happened yesterday. The boss took his hands from his face. He was puzzled. Something seemed to be wrong with him. He wasn't feeling as he wanted to feel. He decided to get up and look at the boy's photograph. But it wasn't a favourite photograph of his. The expression was unnatural. It was cold, even stern-looking. The boy had never looked like that. At that moment, the boss noticed that a fly had fallen into his broad inkpot, and was trying feebly but desperately to clamber out again. "Help! Help!" said those struggling legs. But the sides of the inkpot were wet and slippery. It fell back again and began to swim. The boss took up a pen, picked the fly out of the ink, and shook it onto a piece of blotting paper. For a fraction of a second it lay still on the dark patch that oozed around it. Then the front legs waved, took hold, and pulling its small, sodden body up, it began the immense task of cleaning the ink from its wings. Over and under went a leg along a wing as the stone goes over and under the scythe. Then there was a pause, while the fly, seeming to stand on the tips of its toes, tried to expand first one wing and then the other. It succeeded at last, and, Sitting down, it began like a minute cat to clean its face. Now one could imagine that the little front legs rubbed against each other lightly, joyfully. The horrible danger was over. It had escaped. It was ready for life again. But just then, the boss had an idea. He plunged his pen back into the ink, leaned his thick wrist on the blotting paper, and as the fly tried its wings, down came a great, heavy blot. What would it make of that? What indeed? The little beggar seemed absolutely cowed, stunned, and afraid to move because of what would happen next. But then, as if painfully, it dragged itself forward. The front legs waved, caught hold, and, more slowly this time, the task began from the beginning. "He's a plucky little devil," thought the boss, and he felt a real admiration for the fly's courage. That was the way to tackle things. That was the right spirit. Never say die. It was only a question of... But the fly had again finished its laborious task, and the boss had just time to refill his pen, to shake fair and square on the new cleaned body yet another dark drop. What about it this time? A painful moment of suspense followed. But behold, the front legs were again waving. The boss felt a rush of relief. He leaned over the fly and said to it tenderly, "You artful little bugger." And he actually had the brilliant notion of breathing on it to help the drying process. All the same, there was something timid and weak about its efforts now, and the boss decided that this time should be the last, as he dipped the pen deep into the ink pot. It was. The last blot fell on the soaked blotting paper, and the draggled fly lay in it and did not stir. The back legs were stuck to the body. The front legs were not to be seen. "Come on," said the boss. "Look sharp." And he stirred it with his pen. In vain. Nothing happened, or was likely to happen. The fly was dead. The boss lifted the corpse on the end of the paper knife and flung it into the waste paper basket. But such a grinding feeling of wretchedness seized him that he felt positively frightened. He started forward and pressed the bell for Macy. "Bring me some fresh blotting paper," he said sternly, "and look sharp about it." And while the old dog padded away, he fell to wondering what it was he had been thinking about before. What was it? It was... He took out his handkerchief and passed it inside his collar. For the life of him, he could not remember. The end. Yes, sorry about the bit of fly torture there. Yeah, it's sad. That's a sad one. But, you know, that's how it ends. Yep. And the thing he was thinking of before he started torturing the fly was his dead son. And he can't remember what he's thinking about. Big oof. Yeah. Mansfield's, yeah. Revenge for the fly. Yeah. But... yeah. There's a lot of... the thing I really like, and I wax lyrical about this every time I read Mansfield's, let's throw a bucket of ink over him instead. Well, this is the thing, is like, everything she writes is that there are so many layers to it, and there's so many ways you can interpret bits. And, like, that, to me, that is very much him trying to prove to himself that there was nothing that could be done about his son. That's casually devastating. Yeah, she's very good at that. Like, it's she's good at glimpses, absolutely. And the fact that he's looking at a man who is younger than him, but unfortunately had a stroke, and being all like, oh, is this old guy, and basically thinking he won't get like that, and now he's not remembering what he was just thinking about. And what he was just thinking about was, it's not just a small thing, it's his son who has died in the war. And there's just so many... She's so good at just putting the complexities of how people act and how people think down on paper. Because, like, yeah, torturing a fly by basically waterboarding it with ink is not really a reasonable thing to do. Like, no one's gonna do that unless they're in some kind of mental anguish, or unless they're a complete sociopath, psychopath, that too. But, you know, in this particular instance, it's, you know, it's meant to be dealing with something that is a lot bigger within this character. And yeah, she's great. Good old Mansfield. She's fab. Right. On that lovely happy note, sorry everybody. Let's see if there's anybody to go and raid to. Ooh, quite a few people. I think I'm gonna throw us all over to Stephen. Glad you caused at least some of it. Well, I'm glad you're here too. Thank you, Mary Moss. Yes, I'm gonna throw us over to Stephen. Go say hi. We haven't raided over to Stephen for a little while. We love Stephen. Stephen's great. Go send your love there. Sam will not be reading this Saturday. Busy. But we will be back next week. So thank you all very much indeed for being here. I hope you have enjoyed the various stories that I have read. Go take care of yourselves and everybody around you, and we will see you again next week. Thank you very much, and goodbye.